This is a video to go over the elements of absurdism practice that we did in class on Tuesday. So, as a reminder, absurdism is a literary genre that the Metamorphosis is written in. And the three big elements that you're going to see in it are ambiguity, so the story being very open ended with a lot of unanswered questions, dreamlike elements, so elements of the story that seem kind of like a dream or even a nightmare, and alienation and isolation, so lots of characters that are isolated and are disconnected from the human world. We talked already a lot about how you see ambiguity in the Metamorphosis. Sorry, by the way, my dog is having fun today. um, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about ambiguity. This should be in your notes already. But we talked about how we never really find out why Gregor is an insect. And Gregor really doesn't try very hard to find out either. So we know that we're not going to get that information from him. Another question you could have had, by the way, is that we never find out exactly how Gregor dies. Your textual evidence for this could be found in many places, but one of them is paragraph 3. When Gregor first finds out that he's an insect, he says, "Why don't I keep sleeping a little while longer and forget all this foolishness?" So he already shows there that he's not going to try very hard to figure out what's happened to him. Moving on to the middle column, you're looking for dreamlike elements in this story. And one example of this is how you have Gregor's transformation, which is very unreal, put together with his reaction, which is very practical and logical. This shows you this element where you have the boundary between what is real and unreal blurred. So Gregor's transformation feels very unreal, but his reaction is real. So it kind of creates a confusing parallel between those two things. An example of textual evidence for this is in paragraph 10. We have here a description of a very practical, logical reaction that Gregor has to being turned into an insect. He is trying to figure out how to get up out of bed and describing, again, very logically how he's going to go about doing it. So this shows you how those two things are blending together. It's unrealistic that he's an insect, but very practical for him to be thinking about how to get up out of bed at this time. And finally, you should see examples of alienation and isolation throughout the story. That is all over the place, especially in part 3. But in general, you have Gregor being isolated in his room and becomes increasingly isolated by his condition specifically. He is alienated from human society and he lacks any human contact. By the end of the story, he really is not seeing anybody. And that is actually where I found my textual evidence. This is paragraph 87. And this is the point of the story where Gregor is so neglected that food is kind of just thrown in his room by his sister a couple times a day. She doesn't even check to see if Gregor ate it at all. So he's really getting no human contact at all and no care. And that really makes him feel isolated from his family and from the world. Otherwise, let me know if you have other questions or other thoughts about ways that you see these elements coming up in the Metamorphosis.